going down. Already.
How's it going, everybody? This is Jordan Pacheco from the Glad Triad podcast. I hope you're doing well. I've been hoping to have this conversation for a long time, certainly the past couple of months. So this is going to be great. This, I think, is going to be one of my favorite episodes of 2026. I am sitting with Anna Kalinowska. Is that correct on your name?
That is great.
Oh, thank God.
You nailed it, Jordan.
Let me tell y'all, Anna is a lot of things out here in St. Louis, and I call her the dance mistress of St. Louis. But you're way more than that. There is so much going on. We're going to be having a great conversation. Anna is not just a very fashionable dresser, but she wrote a book about the intersection of dress and fashion and very practical tips, I should mention. So we're going to talk, you know how I love to talk about this stuff on my channel. This is going to be awesome. But we're going to talk about your book, Anna. This is Clothes with Beauty. Look at that. We're going to break down just a little bit about you, your background, but also I think how Catholics are leading the way with a lot of cultural restoration. And so I don't think I'm the worst dresser, but I did get my pink on for this interview. So I hope you appreciate that.
I do.
You know,
do.
You have a whole section talking about men's dress not being very beautiful. We'll talk about that. So I figured a splash of color. Thank you first off for inviting me into your home too. This is the fabulous Polish embassy.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Jordan.
Man, okay, let's start unpacking. Let's have some fun. The culture's a mess. Let's just start by saying that. And so I think right off the bat, I'd love to dig into your background a little bit, because I think that when it comes to, there are a lot of Catholics in particular, but certainly across the culture, a lot of people interested in sort of going back to our roots of how we can dress and think better, how we can put better things into our eyes and into our ears, right? But I do hear immediately the criticism starting, which is just, okay, so like, somebody must have grown up that way, some trad bubble sort of a thing, right?
Yeah.
They're not wearing jean skirts anymore, but they've gravitated to like nice dresses. So just for the audience,
40s dresses.
yeah, the 40s dresses, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So give me a bit of your background, and then also maybe you could talk about any changes that you made, or if you were brought up with like maybe a particular understanding of the beauty of dress and all those kind of things.
Sure. I am so grateful when I reflect on my upbringing in my life for this realization that God reaches into our souls and shines forth in beauty all over the world, even in sort of an anti-culture that we're living in now. So, growing up, when I look at my past, I think it's just this patchwork of things I disliked, things I liked. I think we're all sort of in that boat where we're kind of just like searching out things, and it's like a game of hot and cold. Like, oh, this is good, this is bad. And so I had some great advantages with my upbringing, but then on the other hand, sometimes we were just like anyone else. So I'm from a large Catholic family, and we were conservative but not traditional. So
sure.
We went to a parish that was founded in 1976, and it very much looked like that. And we were...
Is that out here in the St. Louis area?
That's in the St. Charles area.
Okay, got it. Cool.
Yeah, and I remember growing with my siblings, just kind of exposed to different things. So we would go to that church for mass every single day. So my mom, especially, my dad too, but my mom just instilled in us this great discipline. And it was really sometimes a discipline without a lot of consolation, because you're going into this building that isn't beautiful.
Right.
But she really taught us without words that every single day, the best thing you can do is prayer. And then we had some other kind of quote normal things in our lives, like movies. My favorite movie as a kid growing up was like, first, I think one of the Disney princesses, then it might have been Ice Age.
Yeah.
It was animated. Shrek might have even been in there. Until
you already
Lord of the
were a
Rings
woman of
took
culture,
over.
by the way. That's strong.
But yeah, so we had exposure to the real world. We weren't Amish. We dressed conservatively, but at the same time, we wore pants, we wore shorts. And my mom didn't overthink the modesty question. Are there some differences that I would choose if I had daughters? Maybe. But overall, it was just a fairly healthy, balanced way of just kind of not overanalyzing and overthinking things for children especially. But I do remember, it's kind of funny, just little glimmers of longing for beauty, particularly formality growing up, because I would watch things like different BBC productions maybe, or period dramas as I got older, like an adaptation of Pride and Prejudice or something.
The 1990s, presumably.
Yeah, of course. Every adaptation I could find of Jane Austen, but the 1995 one as well. But even like as a little girl watching an adaptation of The Secret Garden and looking at this Victorian mansion and that, just seeing the architecture and the clothing of everyone and wondering like, why can't I have little button boots, or why can't I have a little dress, or why do I have to change out of my dress when I get home from mass? But like these girls are just like out in the dirt in their dresses.
Sure.
Like I had this fascination with like, oh, you could actually wear a dress, like doing something, like doing your activities.
Rebellious, how dare.
Because I just saw it, like it's so much prettier than like the shorts and the t-shirt that I wear when I go out for a walk. And so there were just things like that as a kid, like, but you just kind of accept, you know, the practical ground rules that my parents put in place, where, you know, like we've got to preserve our nice clothing. And
well, and you guys seem to be doing better. I mean, I kind of grew up in a bit of a similar sort of circumstance, right? Except we didn't really, nowadays maybe things are changing, maybe a little bit, but growing up, wearing jeans to mass was acceptable. We were country kids anyway. So the nice jeans came out, right? But we didn't wear shorts. That was very important. And so only like later, even for mass in late high school, early college, did I kind of make a personal change of like, you know, my dad especially always, thank God, always telling me about how mass is about meeting the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And I started taking you've heard the analogy, like how would you dress if you're meeting the king or the queen? I started taking that a little more seriously. So, but it was like a little bit set apart, but it wasn't something that was something I extended, I would say, kind of beyond the occasional Sunday or Christmas or Easter. And I imagine even for you, like growing up north of St. Louis, but still very much close to the city, something out here that's very new to me is this kind of these echoes of the Victorian era and the Gilded Age. And, you know, when I first came here, everyone talking not just about the 1904 World's Fair, but showing buildings that were from there. So I think that I'm sure that also can maybe influence, like those shadows are much more prominent of not just a time of better architecture, but also probably better dress too, I would imagine. Yeah,
that's such a good point. And since I grew up in the St. Louis area, I remember as a child even going on those tours in Forest Park and hearing the history of everything. And I came to this really silly conclusion. I mentioned this in my book. It's so silly. But the conclusion was that, okay, well, things are always going to change and things are always going to be like radically different than they were a century or two before, which that's completely wrong already, but that's what I thought. And, it's just nostalgia. Like, so those people in 1904 probably felt like just as not pretty and not romantic and not formal as I do right now in my t-shirt. And my typical outfit to like go for a walk in Forest Park, for instance, would be like a t-shirt and shorts. And the typical attire for a walk in the park in that time would have been an Edwardian walking dress, button boots with beautiful heels, French heels, a hat that would be a complete work of art, whatever class you were in. everything was just so well crafted at that time. You'd have maybe a sunshade that would be, or a parasol that would be kind of like this giant flower that you're holding.
Yeah.
I mean, it just,
Yeah.
the park is beautiful. You are beautiful. All the people around you are beautiful. But anyway, I did not see, or I kind of like almost forced this like solution, like, okay, well, I guess they had that, but they probably just thought they were super modern and they weren't that happy with how they all looked. Like, I'm not that happy with how we all look.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was just how time worked. And then I started learning a little bit more about history. And the traditional movement actually taught this to me. It was like, actually, there are revolutions, and revolutions turn things upside down and destroy things. And you could look at it starting at the Enlightenment, but the Industrial Revolution was huge, and then or even the Protestant Reformation or Revolution, which is really what it was. So all of these things, and then of course the French Revolution, all of these things start whittling away at everything that I loved and everything that even was still alive a little bit in the Edwardian era, that we can see traces of like the last remnants of it in the city of St. Louis and other older cities, certainly in Europe as well. But yeah, so I realized, okay, like you could turn over an entire universal church's liturgy from something that's almost unrecognizable to what it was for centuries and centuries. And those people that were part of those traditional liturgies would come today and say, this is ugly. They wouldn't just say, oh, well, you're just being nostalgic for what we had. This is just fine.
Yeah. And look at even like, I feel like we even adopt this negative attitude towards people of the past. We look at how they dressed, the architecture, because I think, beauty is interesting. I think there's a part of it that's innate to us, of course, but also it's something that has to be taught and appreciated. Just like the first time I heard classical music, I probably didn't like it very much, or jazz certainly, or a nice painting. You'd go, okay, that's good. Okay, cool. But then you have to kind of learn all the things about it to appreciate. God is much the same way, right? We have this innate desire for God. Our hearts are restless for him. But I feel like it's just like the eunuch with the apostle. Like, how could I understand these things if no one's there to teach me?
Yeah.
So we kind of look back at the past and we go, okay, well, they had their Edwardian walking dresses and they had their suits. And you're right about the class structure still maintaining this kind of beauty of order and dress up and down. We have these great moving images, these movies, these films from the early 1900s, very late 1800s of just people walking. And everyone looks good. Yeah. And but now we fast forward, we go, oh, well, must have just been so hot and so stuffy. And they're from this ultra conservative, terrible culture. And so thank God we're liberated with our Lululemons and our tank tops and our pajama pants and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And it's such an implicit sort of viewpoint that we really have to allow ourselves to like slowly peel back all of those prejudices that we have. I would even say that for some of us, it borders on irreverence, even the way we think about our ancestors, and just the way we think, the way history is just, there's sort of like a ridicule of even like, if you think of like Monty Python and the medieval history, like there's this like, oh, they were all dying of the plague and they talked funny and they had these stupid little codes of chivalry that were so silly. And that's actually shaped so many of us in different ways, even if it's just like this little like hesitance to like think, okay, maybe they had something that we didn't. Maybe all of this technological progression that we've had is actually not necessary. or it's just at best, maybe it's trading one problem for another, because I don't know if we want to go down this rabbit trail, but when you talk about mental health, because so many are talking about it today, you really wonder, is growing up in an ugly world, having to put on formless, ugly clothing every day, and then, drive on the interstate and go to a gray office building. Is that actually the root cause of so much depression that we see today, or general anxiety, or whatever, OCD, whatever the issue happens to be? Just because we don't realize it, or just because we've grown desensitized to the lack of beauty, doesn't mean that the lack isn't still going to hurt us. And so we have to think about, if there's like this great problem, maybe art and this overall structure of form in society, maybe that isn't just like a frivolous vanity of these like triumphalist Victorians, or you name it, whatever period of history you're looking at.
Wasn't that interesting too? Because again, we kind of, in our mind's eye, we kind of stop with the Victorians for some reason. And maybe it's because, of course, that was before, let's say, the horrors of World War I and all these other, like the modern world is kind of really crash landed. That being said, what's interesting is I feel like society, at least here in Western civilization, there's always this harking of quote unquote eternal Rome. You see this in architecture, right? There's, when Napoleon established the French Empire, it was very much in a Romanesque kind of way. Our nation itself, if you go to Washington, American Federalist architecture and all that statues and everything, it evokes imperial Rome. So and just in terms of the order, the structure of society, but also throughout history, this kind of importance of a beautiful space, this importance of how we conduct ourselves in beautiful spaces. St. Louis is a very interesting city for me because, not being from here, I've come into a place where it feels like you can just feel the history of it. Very deep, very beautiful, very rich. And it's not so much, when I first moved here, people were like, "Oh, you're going to die, Jordan. You're going to get shot." And I was like, it's a city. It's not a very great city on crime, I suppose. But it's not so much that I feel like it's just like crime ridden. But what's happening is that there's a very beautiful, very storied part of the city. And then next to it's like a ruin or something. But you kind of look at those buildings down near Francis de Sales. Is that beautiful? It's an old brew house, for heaven's sake. They would have just stored barrels and whatever in it. But I look at it on my drive down to Francis de Sales because I go, I like this. I love this. This architecture has this history. There's a beauty here that just needs to be uncovered, if you will. And I kind of find that I think a lot of Catholics are in this mode. I think that traditionalism has helped that a lot because by uncovering, I think, the beauty and the depth of the liturgy, it forces us, obviously, being a conduit to God, to immediately reflect inward about ourselves. Am I being a good steward of what God has given me? Am I being a good ambassador of God's kingdom on earth? And if I'm not, are there things that I can do to kind of adjust myself, my behavior, how I look, how I speak to people, that are obviously going to be a reflection of Christ? So I love, even in your book, you talk about this. Like there is, and you said it even earlier, like, if you grow up in an ugly place, if you go to a banal liturgy, if you go to a church that looks like a spaceship, what does this do for our souls? If I think what it says to man is that it's all material. It's materialism. And there isn't anything for us to raise ourselves up to. But I think that there's a very intimate tie of liturgy and dress and understanding that I think help us lift our eyes to God naturally.
Absolutely. And I think that there's this heresy really that material things, even with Catholics, because we're good at understanding that the spiritual is our aim, and our souls are spirits, and we long for our heavenly home. And no matter what happens to our bodies, they will be resurrected as long as we seek union with Christ until we join him in heaven and have full union there. However, that there is this very dangerous error of thinking of the spiritual world and then the material world, and the material world is void of meaning and void of our Lord's fingerprints, and that it can't actually be something through which we receive grace. In other words, we're discounting sacramentality. And that to do that is really just to become a Protestant. So if you can think of everything, of course the 7 sacraments, but then the material world, whether it's wood, whether it's beeswax for candles, whether it's the linen or the cotton that we're using in our daily lives, all of that in a sacramental way, you're starting to realize that there's this reverence due to everything around us. And like you said, like there's this feeling of a kind of like a mission or a responsibility to shape our lives and govern our lives in a way that is so discerning and thoughtful about this gift that we have. So we don't just kind of disregard everything. Like we don't demand beautiful churches and beautiful liturgies and then step out the door and live like a fast food, fast fashion life. Because that is extremely inconsistent.
So for you, what were those first kind of deliberate steps that you started making when it came to kind of a change of your wardrobe?
Okay, yeah. I remember being very excited when I got a full-time position as an engineer upon graduation from college. And so I had...
what kind of engineer are you?
An electrical engineer.
Okay.
Yes.
Nerd.
I worked in the field for 8 years, and now I'm doing something much more fun. But so that was a gift too, to have gainful employment for several years. And my parents were very generous when we were growing up, so they supplied for all of our needs. But I did feel a sense of freedom when I had an income, because I could decide, I've earned something here. What am I gonna purchase with it? And I have a place to where I'm going into the office, and I was really stretching it because the where I was working it was hardly even business casual. So it's not like I needed to find very chic corporate clothing, but I just thought, I want to, now I get to do this.
Yeah, sure.
And so I would just go to standard stores at the mall and get kind of business casual, or maybe sometimes more towards business formal. But at that time, I started getting to indulge this love of wearing skirts more. I had also gotten into it a little more in my last year of school in college. And I wonder, it's hard to even pinpoint why. My sisters and I growing up, we were aware of Catholic girls and women who only wore skirts on principle, even like playing at the park. And I always thought it looked really frumpy to have like a mid-length denim skirt and sneakers. Like at the park, I thought like you could be so much more cute just in shorts.
So you saw I think it's a dying stereotype, but it certainly was when I started becoming aware of it, like the trad denim skirt kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, and you kind of wondered, again, this also reaches back to my question about history, because I would think like, okay, well, you look at these little illustrations in something like one of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. And you see Laura and Mary in like these little calico dresses, and they don't look frumpy.
Right.
Like there was something that just about the use of skirts in my current day that I didn't find it appealing. But at the same time, I also did start to realize, especially going to a secular school and just hearing the way that men would disrespect women, and just hearing kind of from that just spoken objectification of women just all around me, and realizing like how men who are not living lives of virtue will view you and kind of see through your clothing even, did make me realize that there's something to be said for going even beyond what you might feel you need to for your dignity, because there are those who will, because they haven't received the truth and they aren't cultivating lives of virtue, their eyes will do everything they can to undress you. So I think the market got a little bit better too, like circa 2012, 13. I just remember there were some standard mall stores that started carrying like knee-length skirts, just simple cotton skirts that I would wear with like a t-shirt and sandals. And I remember like, oh, this isn't frumpy. I was pretty much in this following fashion for like corporate dress, wearing like straight skirts, like probably a little above my knees, and shirts without sleeves sometimes. And I would wear skirts that were a little form fitting, because I just thought like, you know, if it's not like really tawdry looking, like it's fine, and it doesn't need to be below the knee. Like I knew that there were different guidelines, whether it's like in the Christian choir that I was in as a kid, there was a rule about where the hemline of the skirt should be. And then I heard that Catholics had these standards as well sometimes, but I just thought like, you know, like my knee isn't gonna cause anyone to sin, whatever. But like I did become more aware just as a woman, like you see other women wearing clothing, and you see how the clothing looks in a way that you can't see when it's on your own body. And a religious sister one time even said, if you wear a skirt that is, the hemline slips up above the knee when you sit down, you are exposing yourself, because like you're relying on a shadow at that point for your modesty, like inside the skirt. So that really stuck with me. And I realized that I wanted to wear longer skirts. It wasn't like a hard and fast rule I made for myself, but I just started kind of bypassing the knee length skirts that I had just had this little window of time really where like I liked that. And then I kind of started to feel the same way about tops that didn't have sleeves. I just thought I like having my shoulders covered. But the big transformation took place when I started in my mid-20s. I started attending the traditional mass. At that time, I was going just about daily, and I was just with this little group of daily mass attendees, and no one yelled at me or shamed me or anything when I wore things that were definitely more revealing than everyone else there. And that's for different reasons, because like some of the women at those masses were older, whatever. But I just felt in a way like I was very much like a young professional who was in a way disregarding their sensibilities to wear this clothing that was much more kind of the world. But I just thought like, you know, I don't want to look frumpy. I kind of thought they looked frumpy, but they were also really nice and good, prayerful people. And I almost started to like feel this sense of reverence towards them. Like, well, I don't want to come in here and like be the one that's not, you know, like they're not gonna yell at me. And maybe I know some people do have experiences where they do have comments that are made to them, and like that can be very jarring. That just wasn't my experience. My experience was like they just were welcoming, they didn't have to say anything for me to realize that they weren't in support of like these shorter skirts I was wearing. And I was okay with wearing a chapel veil because I was like, I remember even I had this one outfit. I'll bore you with the details.
No, please do.
So it was a knee length, if not above the knee, pinstripe pencil skirt it was part of my skirt suit that I bought for my senior design presentation in school. But I would wear that skirt and then like a formal, like dress tank top, and this white blazer that I thought was just so elegant.
Mm-hmm.
And like a long necklace, and I'd wear my lace chapel veil with that. And I just thought like, okay, I think that the lace kind of adds to this. But I do remember kind of at that time thinking like, okay, I might take off my blazer at work, but I'm not going to take it off here in church because I don't want my shoulders to show.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember sometimes thinking like, oh, well, my veil kind of covers my shoulders a little bit. That's good. And then I just had this thought like, why am I putting a veil on my head when like I have my knees and my shoulders exposed? It just kind of like seemed like a contradiction to me. It wasn't part of like the overall spirit of the ensemble that I talk about it a little bit in the book, this principle of harmony.
Yeah.
Where harmony is of all the principles, it's just so far reaching, and it's governing not only shapes and lines and textures, but also this idea. And I think that's what I was sensing even before I started delving into the art principles, was like, there's just a lack of harmony in my very kind of, I guess, like boss girl corporate outfit. And then like, oh, but I also want to wear a veil. And then I don't think the good faithful around me are necessarily, I'm sure they appreciate that like I've dressed up a little bit, but yeah. And so all of that kind of coming together, I didn't have a dramatic point where I like lit up bonfire and like burned all my old clothing. Those are funny stories when you hear about them. But I just, as I continued to shop, I ended up just looking for things that were longer, looking for sleeves, and just realizing that only was more what I wanted anyway. A lot of those heroines in the period drama that I admired growing up were in those longer pieces. And of course, like, I'm not trying to dress like Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, but there's sort of a universal thread through these graceful garments, and part of that is the length and the amount of fabric, because it's kind of silly today how we have everyone says we don't have the scarcity that they had in the past, like, oh, everything was so scarce. Clothing was passed on generation after generation because it was so valuable. And now we're supposed to have so much of everything, but we cut garments in just like the most skimpy way you can imagine. Like, even if you have a skirt from the store, like you could go to Target and buy a skirt. It might be like 1 yard of fabric. It might be less. You look at some of the...
you have to forgive my male brain, by the way, but I don't know what 1 yard of fabric computes to.
So if you think about different styles of dress, yardage can vary quite a bit. But even in these times of scarcity that I'm talking about, it would be at least several yards of fabric.
Okay, for like a skirt,
even like a servant's dress.
Okay, I see.
And then you look at like the 1950s, where like Dior has this last gasp, like before the 60s, before you really see everything go off a cliff. Dior, it starts producing skirts again because everyone's happy that the rations and all of the rules that govern the 40s, because we had to have all materials going to the war.
Everything,
that's all lifted. And so they're like, we're going to make a skirt with 50 yards of fabric. Like, they just decide to use it as much as they possibly can. And it's kind of this celebration of fullness and abundance. Like, if you think of a rose, like in the wedding industry, brides love garden roses. Garden roses are the ones that have all the petals. They're like this big, and it's just packed with all these little petals. A regular rose is just like the little kind of tighter bloom. Sometimes they open, sometimes they don't. But it's like, I don't know really where this saying less is more applies, because most of the time for human beings, it's more is more. We love this fullness because our God is full and abundant and infinite, and beauty, everything that we long for, we're longing for him, and we have this hunger for him. So we're looking for his qualities in everything. So there are nuances to that, of course, but I guess to wrap up this little progression of mine, as I transformed my wardrobe just gradually, I felt a great amount of peace with that. And then I even started to just like take more risks because I learned more things about history, like fashion. We talk about fashion, and I don't often actually even use the word fashion in my writing because I don't want to promote Catholic fashion, because fashion isn't necessarily like an ideal social phenomenon. Fashion really picked up speed with the fall of the French monarchy, and you have fashion before that, but as egalitarianism increases, and then the ability to produce things with machinery increases, you're producing all these things, and they're not necessarily like what they appear to be, but they're something, right? So in the past, you could make lace by hand and work on it for years and years and years. And then it would go to a queen who would wear it and pass it on generation after generation to her daughters. And it would be part of the family treasury, actually. But like in the Industrial Revolution, you have machines making lace. So everyone, even lower classes, they're all wearing lace. But it's not the same as that royal lace. And so that's what I mean with fashion. Things can change very quickly, and entire societies can decide, well, this is how we're all going to look now. This is the right way to look. And then that can change 6 months later. And everyone has to sort of keep up with that. Whereas in the past, that wasn't even a possibility, that rate of change. And so there was a much greater freedom and a sense of leisure even, and peace in just wearing what you had received from your parents or your grandparents even. And taking the time, if you were going to produce something new, taking the time to make it something that was worth having, that was going to be enjoyed by your daughters and your granddaughters. So we are still very much in a world governed by that fast rate of change. And I don't think that it's wrong if we feel a sense of discomfort looking totally different from those around us. So I wouldn't don like a medieval tunic because I would like to return to the 1100s. But I wouldn't don a medieval tunic because I don't believe that our Lord is asking us to put ourselves in like a psychological tension like that.
Yeah. Like we're not antiquarians, you know? So there is like, I feel like with dress, there's a very organic progression. Like different eras look different, although there are a lot of principles that remain the same.
Exactly.
Although you might be able to figure out how to rock a medieval tunic. I don't know. You've done the research and the homework, but there's something kind of nice that, like, you know, like I'm sure that you could break down like what kind of dress you have on now. It feels, I'm going to be very imprecise, but like it feels kind of like a little 40s. I don't know how else to kind of but there's something timeless also. There's something that like harkens back to a really not just like a snapshot, like it's a costume. It does feel lived in, and I think it's a really important thing too. Like we can still have that intersection of things in our own time, which is good.
Exactly. And you mentioned earlier in our conversation, because this ties back into what you mentioned earlier, this appearance of classical architecture at different points in time. It kind of comes back. Or the same thing will happen with Gothic or Romanesque. But it's with dress, you also see that because it's really just in any art. And that's one of the main points of my book, is that dress is an art. So really whatever we know about art also applies to dress. But with any art, we can see that there are things that come up again and again over time. And one of the things that actually frustrates me most, and about which I will write more, is when I would say critics look at me or what I'm presenting as an example ensemble and say, like, that's weird, that's dated. And I think it's understandable because we all have associations with clothing and when we have seen what part of history we have seen certain things.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely going to be there for us. However, we have to understand that there are beautiful things, like, for instance, a particular line that men of all ages will always love. So I'm going to talk about, just as an example, there's what we call the S curve or the OG, which is a weird word, but it's basically just an S curve. And this actually shows up in Gothic architecture. So you can take a Gothic arch, which is the pointed one. It's got like that concave shape. And then you can add a convex, like, little twist to it. And you get that side of the arch is like an S curve. And then the other side, you do another S curve. And it's just an extra sort of level of grace and detail. But you also see that same shape in different kinds of art as like dress. So it's the shape of the heel of a lot of shoes. So today, much to my frustration, we see a lot of block heels that are just literally like a cube attached to the back of the woman's shoe. And there's really no line whatsoever around her heel and then down into the heel of the shoe. But this heel that I'm talking about, or this S curve that I'm talking about, shows up actually in the French court of Louis XIV. So it's now often called the French heel or the Louis heel. So if you think of shoes, I'm trying to think of an example. If you think of like the pumps that Louis XIV would be wearing, or even the shoes that Mary Poppins pulls out of her carpet bag.
Yeah.
I know probably some of the Gen Zs haven't even watched Mary Poppins, but
they're all over. You'd be surprised.
Yeah,
you'd be surprised. They're all like, yo, we grew up, we watched it we pirated it when we were 4.
So you see the same shape of this heel. It's just a beautiful shape. You see it in the French court, and then you see it again in the Edwardian age. And then you see it again even in the 30s, the 1930s. And so I sometimes will buy vintage inspired things because I like the look of them. So I wanted this particular line. I wanted this in my shoe. So I buy these heels that are like a copy of a 1930s shoe. I did not set out to be a 1930s reenactor. I really didn't care. I really didn't care about looking like I was from the 30s, but I wanted something that they had. And they wanted something the Edwardians had. And the Edwardians wanted something that the French court had.
Yeah.
So it's like this timeless thing that men of taste keep rediscovering throughout history. Like, this looks really good on the human body.
Yeah.
We should wear shoes like this. And it's the same with other shapes in our dress, you know, like even flattering our form, like with a waistline. And like, if you look at pictures from the 20s, what we see in movies, even of flappers, like that is like the best, the most idealized, the most beautiful possible way a flapper could ever look, which isn't very good.
Yeah.
Because they divided the human form in two parts and they divided it at the wrong place.
I'm glad you brought this up, by the way, because I love 1920s jazz, but I think the 30s, we got it. Like when I watch movies from the 30s, I'm like, yeah, this feels how men look, how women look. It's one of those times where they both line up at the same time. Every once in a while, I feel like dress is very like hurts a little bit. And I feel like with the 20s, like the flapper dress, like I mean, again, I don't have the terminology, but just like the straight kind of boxy dress, like the low sort of lines and stuff. It just, it doesn't work.
And most of what we've seen for that is on actresses and models today who are sort of replicating that time editorially or for a film, or we see it in like old fashioned plates. But if you look at vintage photos from that time of the average body type wearing that, it's so bad. It's so bad. And so I think like sometimes the pendulum like swings so far in a bad direction that it is righted a little bit. Like so with the 30s, it gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then of course, whatever improvement the 30s could have, the momentum that the 30s could have had was snuffed out with all of the war restrictions. Until you see again in the 50s, things are just, they're feminine and graceful, not always modest. But like there is this idea of women should be beautiful.
Well, this is I think is so many things, Anna. Gosh darn. I think so here's the side of the pond here. There's such a beauty to the art of dress as you're kind of talking about. And I do think that we are in an era where classical, maybe natural, I don't know how else to describe it, but just like the beauty of form and harmony and these kind of things we're sort of taught in a lot of ways to cast off. In the world of film that I inhabit, we're always subverting the expectations. And so unfortunately, as a result, I think that we've lost, even inside film, like the beauty of what makes for good female writing. Let's give an example. Some of my favorite female not actors, some of my favorite female characters, there's the word, they come from older films. They tend to, I love to hate Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, but she's good. Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, there's just a lot. Blanche, A Streetcar Named Desire. Like there's just a lot of really good characterization nowadays because you have to subvert things. What's unfortunate, I think, happened is that we've turned a lot of women into weaker men when it comes to film, which is one of my many reasons why I think even a big film like the latest Star Wars films that won't need to be named ever again in history, thank God, I don't think work because I think that they unfortunately go against kind of nature. So when it comes to like dress and how men and women are, there's something that's not, it's revolutionary to be not revolutionary is kind of what we live in. So I think it does accentuate like the beauty, the zenith of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. Clothes make the man's an interesting phrase. I've heard that all my life. Apparently, this is an old English phrase. Thomas More would have understand it as clothes maketh the man is what I learned. But there's something to it. Like you dress a little bit better and you do lift yourself up. You carry yourself in a different way and people do notice. And it's not that they're necessarily just looking at you. Like you're not dressing just to like stand out and pop out and it's for your own vainglory, but to kind of just bring a little bit of beauty and order back into the world. And people do respond to that in a very beautiful sort of way.
Yeah. And I would say that this is it is bringing that beauty and that order back. And so this is one way to do that, but it is more fundamental than just one of many strategies. It's so closely linked to human nature and expressing exactly who we are as humans, especially who we are as baptized Catholics. And during this Eastertide, I've been getting to do some more research on the meaning of clothing. So it's kind of stepping back and looking even more philosophically, but also in a way that I think is very, will very much influence how we can think about why we dress better. Because I think the new evangelization, so you have like all of these ways to try to reach people and attract people, right? And we're always talking about the strategies of like, you don't always have to use words and all these different things. But it starts to be a little bit of a sales game. And I think that we owe ourselves more, and that the Lord has kind of given us more. It's not always just about like what's going to get us more customers, so to speak. It's about restoring the truth and first of all, being able to inform ourselves of that, and then expressing that to the world around us. So the meaning of clothing, there's an essay that I have just been drawing just so much meditation from, and I mention it actually in my reviews in the book, but it's called The Theology of Dress by Eric Peterson. And it's kind of like an overlooked essay about dress, written several decades ago, but there's so much there. And one of the main points that he makes is that Adam and Eve in the garden, we all kind of hear they were naked, but they weren't ashamed because all of our appetites were in perfect order before the fall. But the reality is that Adam and Eve were clothed in God's glory. So God created human nature with this completion of clothing. And it just so happens the original plan was for that clothing to be his glory. But he created humans to be clothed in something. And with the fall, Adam and Eve are stripped of their heavenly garments of light, and then they really are naked, and they have to turn to the material world and make clothing. And so then you kind of think like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, is clothing now just like this like thing that we're grabbing at the material world to like patch ourselves up because we messed it all up, and now it's really sad? But we sometimes forget that baptism not only restores our souls and draws us back into relationship with the Father as his children, but baptism restores our entire relationship with the material world. So everything in the material world can really be considered part of the sacramental world. And this means that materials can be means of grace for us and ways of us reaching greater union with Christ. So when we dress now, it is not the same. Our clothing is not the same as the fig leaves or the skins of Adam and Eve that were very much garments of mourning. And what we wear now is actually more like a wedding garment, because we have this restored relationship with the Father. And that means that every single day that we wake up, we have a wide open road to seek union with Christ. And it's like we're waking up to a new wedding day with him. And what we wear is a wedding garment to meet him and to delight him. And that's an echo of that beautiful baptismal garment that we had. And there's a whole history behind that even. So throughout history, we see different things with baptism, and now it's mainly infant baptism. But actually, in the early days of the church, you have many adults being baptized, and adults would be baptized with little or no clothing. And then there's a part in the rite of baptism where a new Christian receives his baptismal garment.
Yeah.
And that the priest has a prayer for that. And there's a rubric where it says you're handing this white garment to the newly baptized. So that image makes it much more clear than what is happening with dress. Now today with infant baptism, they dress the little infant in his white gown, and he is baptized in that gown, but he has it on before the pouring of the water, before the anointing. But technically, the actual reception of that white garment is supposed to be after that point. And we see that because it's like only at that time, once you've been baptized and anointed, have you had your garment of glory restored to you, the garment that Adam and Eve lost. So then we have this treasured garment, of our baptism, and regardless of what type of baptism or how old you were, we do have today kind of an understanding that that's something special. But then what about the clothes that we wear after that? What do those mean? Are they back to the old? But no, the church teaches you're supposed to put on the new man. You put on Jesus Christ every day. So our clothing today is an echo of that baptismal garment and sort of a foretaste of garments of glory in heaven, all bespeaking that union with Christ that we long for as brides, longing for our beloved. So as a woman, I just find that really a delightful truth, because it just opens up this wide field of freedom to celebrate every single garment and question, okay, I might be going to the grocery store right now, but today is still a day that I can be wedded to our Lord. What am I going to wear for this?
That's so beautiful. We are made temples of the Holy Spirit, I heard. So clothing becomes our adornment of the temple. So there is where we now have this great honor that we don't have to dress, we're not wearing burqas out there in the streets, or being frumpy. And I do think that is a very important thing to happen. And also, we do need to be mindful of how we're going to adore the temple, right? How we're going to dress in a way that is ultimately, again, demonstrating the fact that we are made new because of our baptism. I think that's such a beautiful, compelling thought. And I do expect to hear it in your next book, by the way.
Okay.
So speaking of which, I want to break your book down just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because again, this was one of my favorite reads of 2026. That's with no shred of grandiose. I don't need to, puff you up anymore. Again, clothed with beauty. This is great. I want you to explain. You had this great explanation. You've said it to me before, but even down to the cover art that you got to pick. Who's homegirl here, and why does she look like she doesn't care that she burnt your castle down or something like that?
Okay, so yes, I love telling this story, and when one thinks about putting out something on dress, you have to sort of ask, what do I do? And since I've read many books on dress, I've seen different strategies. Some don't show even a human figure at all. Let's just show something like a flower.
Mm-hmm.
Some, I've seen one that was sort of line art of a mannequin, a dress form, a kind of cute dress form. Okay, it's about dress, whatever. And then sometimes, I don't know, you'll see something I don't know, a woman in just clothing that is sort of supposed to just be very dignified but also normal or for this day and age. I wanted to do something that was not shying away from the fact that it is about dress. I wanted to show a human figure, but I didn't want to just pick some picture of myself, or I didn't necessarily want to do stock imagery or something like that. yet I didn't want to choose like a historical period and alarm readers more than maybe I already alarmed them.
It's quite shocking stuff, I assure you.
Well, no, I mean, just like there are plenty of fears out there, I think, that we will have to go back to some dreaded, you name it, whatever.
Yep.
I don't want to look like 1800s. I don't want to look 1900s. Like all these different preferences, which are fine. But I love medieval manuscripts, and I definitely browse through them, both in books that I have and then also online. And when I was looking for a cover image for this book, I don't even remember like what brought me to this manuscript, but it was part of a search. It was part of a concerted search for something. And I saw this image and I thought, this is so compelling because it really illustrates the principles that are in the book. So it doesn't contradict anything. And I can talk about that a little more if you'd like me to nerd out a little on that.
Yeah, we got time.
Just so even like if you look at the principle of harmony, everything in this, so you have great color harmony because the different hues are so balanced where like you have these primary colors, so red, yellow, blue, but they're all like the proper shade and intensity to balance each other out so that it's not like garish in a way. Mm-hmm. You have and then the black just sort of like grounds it. With proportion, you have this amazing sort of nuanced proportion between the land and the sky and a diagonal line, because it's just so interesting. You know, it's not a flat horizontal and it's not half and half. And then you have like sort of textures and rhythms with the little beautiful ornamental flowers behind her. But the woman herself, she has these lines like this jaunty horizontal scarf and this wonderful hat, and then like a lovely Gothic sway. So in a lot of Gothic art, you have that S curve that I talked about, and it'll travel sometimes through an entire human figure. So here you kind of see that with her, and it just adds this sense of strength, but it's still graceful. Yeah. And then motion. And she's holding her spindle here and her thread of silk, because it turns out the woman depicted here is Pamphila, who is said to have been the first woman to spin silk, according to Pliny the Elder and even St. Augustine. So many would say that's been debunked now, and the Chinese created silk, but I don't know. The legend is so beautiful.
Maybe she traveled to China for it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, but because materials are such an important part in this book as well, I couldn't even believe it when I read that was the story behind this manuscript miniature, that it was about a woman who she was making silk. And in the book, I'm arguing for natural fibers like silk over synthetics. So she's not only sort of illustrating many of the art principles that I believe can help us today, but she's also this champion for the natural. Mm-hmm. And finally, I'll just say her face is not necessarily the face of a young girl. There's sort of like a wisdom and a gravity about her. She kind of has like a double chin. I mean, she's not supposed to be this Vogue model. She stands for something that is so great and profound. Like, it's not the sensibility of some art director. It's something so timeless. Yeah. And I just thought is someone that could inspire anyone who picks up the book, even there. Yeah, so I found the image and I thought, I don't know if I can find a high enough resolution. And my publisher Dr. Kwasniewski at OSUST has a friend who works with the library in France that manages almost all of the world's medieval manuscripts, and they found the proper resolution image. So
there you go.
Here we go.
You're connected. No, I had such a great time with this book, and let me tell you some of the reasons, and then you can kind of unpack a little bit. So, there are a lot of books out there, and you actually go through towards the end, but there are a lot of books. I've read some of them, certainly heard of some of them. I certainly watch a lot of YouTubers and other content creators when it comes to talking about the art of dress, modesty, these sorts of things. I feel like I'm a kind of guy who, on one hand, there is a kind of very beautiful theological or philosophical approach, and you even have it here, a Catholic philosophy of dress. But I do think that sometimes some of these books are very like philosophical, if you will, and they don't really give you an example. They don't really tell you a practical sort of guide, which tends to be naturally how my brain is anyway, especially when it comes to like anything that has to do touching on the faith as well. Like, there's a great beauty even down into the liturgy. Like, we have this great meaning behind many of the reasons the vestments are and the sort of instruments of the altar, but also there's some very practical reasons they also exist. And I think that's kind of cool. So what I love about your book right away is that there is a sort of a clear practical guide on principles to look out for. And I think that's really helpful because it helps kind of clear away some of the noise, but also it really helps buoy up also this very beautiful Catholic approach to dress that you talk about as well. So, you mentioned harmony, for instance, earlier, and at true to great books, this book has pictures in it too. So you'll have pictures where it shows lines, and this is an unbalanced image. And I don't have all the terms. Maybe you can tell them all, because I know there's like balance, harmony, beauty, elegance, like all these kind of concepts that you have breaking down through here.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to say that I have learned so much from other writers, philosophers, artists, because it was never my intent to go and create my own system. Sometimes there's a need for that in different fields, but I didn't have my own system up my sleeve, and I didn't feel the need to create one because it's not something that I'm claiming that I figured out, but I read certain things. So like I read The Lost Art of Dress by Linda Przywaszewski, and she wrote this. One of her primary sources was Art in Everyday Life, written in 1911 by the Goldstein sisters. And I also have a lot of influence from Dietrich von Hildebrand, so in his aesthetics. And it wasn't so much like I wanted to develop my own system, but just I wanted to draw different pieces together from other things that I had read from writers who really just got it. So with The Lost Art of Dress, the research is so honest about how things changed, and it's so unhindered by a sense of like a sense of getting bogged down in the weeds about like feminism or liberation or technology. It's just an honest look at dress as an art and what happened throughout, especially like the 19th and 20th centuries with dress. And then why that happened. And just when you read the full story, so that's like we were talking about the 20s and the 30s, much of what really sunk in for me, and when that really sank in, was when I read that book, The Lost Art of Dress, but then started delving into the sources for that book. So these writers, the Goldstein sisters, were writing college textbooks for home economics programs, where they were trying to train women to live lives of beauty in a sort of egalitarian world. And there was a sort of humility at that time, where like you had this leveling of the classes, but you still had men and women kind of realizing, okay, we're supposed to live like rich people now. How do we do it? And so there was actually at that time a fair amount written about, well, here's how you do it. This is what you have to make your home look like. And there were rules and things, but it wasn't coming from it wasn't coming from sort of an ideological standpoint or from some like fashion powerhouse magazine that is just saying like this season this is in style.
Sure.
It was about, so the
Far more
sources,
overarching.
these writers were using classical art. They were using Japanese prints, ancient Japanese prints. So they were using timeless and universal principles to guide just an average housewife in what she should how she should design her clothing, because at that point in time they were very much guiding home sewers. So with that, I guess I thought, you know what, there's really everything we need here. You have, and Dietrich von Hildebrand with aesthetics. So he's I can't praise his work enough. Many will have their different views about his philosophical system or his metaphysics, but with aesthetics, he's very much just a guide and like sort of a set of eyes into a world that he actually experienced before the Second World War. He lived in Europe, and he traveled, and he had an amazing memory for every single piece of art that he saw throughout Europe. And he writes about that, and he writes about what was successful and what was a problem. And it's funny, his approach to like modernism and modern art was he really just didn't talk about it. So he just talked about beautiful things and the hierarchy within the scope of the beautiful, or what he calls the value family of beauty. So you have things like beauty is the queen, but then you have elegance and prettiness and loveliness and grace. And there are other sort of aesthetic values that can describe things in a way that's maybe more accurate. And he's pointing out like, where it's appropriate for something to be like pretty, or where like certain things should always be beautiful, like in the liturgy, and where there is in the Catholic life, there is hierarchy, and that's appropriate. But what we don't have room for is ugliness in anything. And he makes the point about how harmful the Industrial Revolution was, and how humans, even until recently, had a view that if you're going to make something, you should make it appropriate and lovely. You should make a chair to be attractive and maybe comfortable as a secondary thing.
Nice when the intersections are there, right? You know.
So I would say with von Hildebrand, it's kind of like what they say, like a red pilling. Like it's just, you're reading about a man who, he is a romantic, maybe he's nostalgic, but he's so intelligent, and he's so trustworthy in everything that the personal experience that he has with art, that he really is this wonderful guide. So I read other things too, and I continue to read, but like those authors kind of are really helped to shape this. But there was also kind of a sense of, when I read some books about Dress Today by Catholics, I felt a lack of something. So I was also, with this book, wanting to draw together the ideas that I saw were so useful from certain writers, but then also responding to what I saw as a failure in many books on dress by Catholics today, because the kind of upshot of most of these Catholic books on dress is that, like, you're a daughter of God, you're beautiful inside and out, you don't have to be weird, you can be normal, and we're going to empower you to be your best version of yourself. You know, like, a lot of jargon gets in there. And after searching these books, you know, like reading them, thinking, this is where I started. You know, I wanted to read what's out there right now. Mm-hmm. I just thought, like, there's nothing in here that's actually a real lesson in art. There's just like some back padding, and I don't know that it's even deserved always, because, like, what if you are talking to someone who's dressing in a way that's not good? then you need to give her tools rather than just like this blanket empowerment of normalcy. And so that, especially like if you study the history of costume history, if you study material history, or just culture in general, you'll see that like our normal today is not the same as normal 100 or 200 or 300 years ago.
Yeah.
Like the whole underlying philosophy is inverted. And that means like today bad is good and good is bad. And ugly things are promoted and beautiful things are sort of pushed aside. And so like, I wondered if I could put together a book that had real concrete lessons for Catholic women. So it wasn't about like hiding the faith or like speaking to like the whole world. I just wanted to address things I mean, certainly the whole world could read it, but I didn't want to spend the time like sort of being like an evangelical catechesis for Catholicism. I wanted to just say like, no, I think there are so many women out there of strong faith, of strong catechetical background, but maybe their exposure to art and the principles of art isn't there right now. Or maybe it's there, but not in the field of dress. So like, how does that translate over to dress? And so maybe some of my analytical background with engineering came in where I wanted to sort of even just diagram, like put an outfit on a dress form and look for the art principles, look for harmony, look for proportion, look for balance, look for emphasis, and figure out, is this successful? Is it not successful? And it was fun. It was overwhelming. And I think really I just like scraped the surface a little bit. Like there's so much more.
I already told you I want other books like this, No, it's been great. And, you talk about even in your own life, the experimentation, because now you have these principles under your wing. And so I feel like it's very helpful because it's going to encourage other people also kind of see why experimentation is important, but also it's like when you learn a sport, you have to have those kind of guidelines that will help you just become better at the sport. Implicitly in all conversations about modesty is a sort of dominance of the conversation for women, I would say. I feel like, and so, what I like about your book also is you actually do have a chapter on men's dress, which is different. I do feel like, in fact, we've talked about this because one of the things you talk about throughout your book is even down to the title, like Clothed with Beauty, what makes for a beautiful dress as well. But I love your chapter on men's dress because I think that you say at one point, we will simply have to settle for elegance, I think is what you say.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is like, we're going through the history of it. Does dress I think some of it might be self-evident, if you will, but I think it's fun to talk about. Why is this more of a topic for women? Why is it, at least like, it seems like with guys, like you tell a guy, put on a shirt that fits you and a tie and you're like 50% there. But it seems to be much more room and maneuver with women. But also it's a subject that like, as a man, like I have to have you on my podcast even to talk about this. And I'm very happy to, because this is your field and I respect it. Ladies, I respect it. But it's like, you can't get a guy being like, hey, yo, dress better.
Yeah. Well, and there's just sort of a wider, I guess, field of play for women in dress, which I am always very excited about. Like, so women, and von Hildebrand actually makes this point in his aesthetics. Like, he says that because of the French Revolution and like the triumph of the suit and trousers for men, there's just a much narrower paradigm of what men's dress can be, even the most formal men's dress. So that's why it is so amazing to see different like religious orders or societies where the clergy will be wearing choir dress and things that like have that greater volume of fabric and more ornamentation, or just different ornamentation than what you could have on a suit or even a tuxedo. Or you have like the Swiss Guard ceremonial dress, like that kind of color combination. But most people are not the Swiss Guard or clergy in a traditional religious order. Yeah. So most men, because, like I said earlier, because it is good and I would say prudent to not put ourselves in a position where we are under kind of a sort of discomfort with like, I feel like I look really different from everyone else right now. Like I'm not, even though I do argue against like the tyranny of normalcy, I'm not saying that men should go and dress up as like a Swiss Guard member when you have to go to your job every day and interact with people. And it's just too distracting for everybody if we all turn life into sort of a costume party.
Yeah.
But for women, we don't have the same narrow paradigm. Like it's not always just like a jacket and trousers for us, much as many powers that be would want to make it. It's almost just like in spite of all of the forces of evil, like women so yearn for the grace and ornamentation and a kind of fullness. You'll even see like when a mother wears like a long full skirt, a little child, it feels so comfortable just coming up to her skirt.
Yeah.
And either like hiding behind it a little bit or taking a little handful of that fabric. And like a little child can't take a handful of yoga pants. Like
I expect that to be the next name of your book, by the way, Handful of Yoga Pants. You know, an opening salvo against athleisure.
So there's just something, I think, like because women will always be mothers, and because women will always love to be beautiful, because like that too is in our nature, you know, as to be in a way like that first delight for Adam when he says like, this is bone of my bone and flesh. Like he sees like sort of himself, but like more beautiful. And that's so women delight in that, even if they don't understand why. And even if they become a little bit confused or lost, say like a woman doesn't have the faith or doesn't understand her purpose and her true beauty, she can fall into like objectifying herself and helping others objectify her. And then that beauty is so tainted at that point, but still like the goal was good. The goal, that quest for beauty was there. And so within that wider paradigm, you have options for skirts. Well, skirts can be all different shapes. Skirts can be all different kinds of things. You can have a skirt that's like a giant bell, or you can have a skirt that's like a mermaid's tail. Like, and you have to decide what's good, what's bad, what's too form-fitting. It's the same for sleeves. It's the same for the bodice, for necklines, because it's all related to how do I kind of celebrate this beauty and this joy in being beautiful, that without taking this in a direction that is going to lead others actually away from beauty. So that's where all those arguments come in, and then there develop systems like from well-meaning people about like, okay, this is a test you have to do. Like if you poke your fabric and it like springs back, this is real. And it springs, it's kind of like making bread or something. Like, or there are tests like if your hem is like higher than like the width of a dollar bill, it's too high, things like that. Which I think in limited contexts are okay. Like if you have a school dress code
Yeah.
and you want to have some distinct rules for parents, like that's great. But that's not the ultimate answer. Ultimately, you would want generation after generation to form their sons, but especially their daughters, in just this sense of decency and a true love of beauty that is always directing the heart to heaven.
Yeah.
And that I make the point in the book, like good taste is not just like this snobby thing about like tipping up your nose and like being just a little bit more cultivated than your neighbor at the bridge party.
Mm-hmm.
Taste is such a gift of discernment, or such a kind of manifestation of this virtue of art. So art is a virtue. It's one of the intellectual virtues. And it takes a long time to learn good taste. So the way most of us are living now, like whether you're a millennial or a Gen Z, you're having to learn taste really quickly.
Yeah.
Because like maybe you were red pilled at some point and then you were like, oh, I want to change everything in my life. I want to live I want to go to a traditional mass. I want to live in a traditional house. I want to have all natural fibers.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have a modest outfit. I want to have a certain job, a certain car, no car. And you realize that you don't even realize everything at once, but then you start realizing things and you start having to make artistic decisions really quickly.
Yeah.
And there aren't really that many guides in how to do that, because you have to really sort of think carefully about, like, is a magazine about home and garden really going to guide you in the right direction? Or do you need to look back to one of these older books? So with that being said, what we have to do now, we have kind of like a damage control or a cleanup or some kind of like operation right now that is very much at ground zero. But in the future, we can hope that it might be easier for our children, or it might be easier for their children, because they can trust that their parents are looking at something that's not just a fad and not just keeping up with the Joneses. Yeah. But it's something, we're looking for things that are universal and objectively beautiful and timeless. And if we can reclaim those things and embrace them in our own lives, our children will just grow up steeped in that environment and be able to continue along that path and maybe even achieve things that like we'll never get to. So that was a comfort to me, I guess, just getting back to the book, like writing the book, thinking that it's so daunting when you look at an art like dress that everyone is a practitioner of this art and everyone practices the art every day thereabout. But it's like, okay, this is such a large thing. How is one book going to really change that? But you do actually achieve quite a change if you can just start thinking differently and start realizing like that you don't have to be in this fashion rat race and you don't have to be stuck in this this vice of normalcy that will never really satisfy those deeper longings for beauty, because normalcy is just so driven by a rejection of all truth, goodness, and beauty today. So yeah, that's a long answer for your question.
That is a perfect kind of answer. Oh man, well, we're gonna have to definitely come back and talk, I think. But Anna, tell us, where is it best to get your book or any of your other trains of thought? What works best?
Yeah, so the book is published by Aususti Press, and you can order it online, many different places. And I really just hope that it can be a good tool and a starting point for just a more joyful life for readers.
I think that's beautiful. The last thing I'll say with it is that one of the most lifestyle changes for this year came from this book, which is that I've started moving. It wasn't like so off base, but after I read your book, and you have this great explanation throughout on natural fibers, and especially since I'm out here in Missouri, which is hot toddy, I learned the beauty of linen, especially when I mow my lawn. But like cotton, I was revamping my suits anyway, so I got wool suits. This is still 50-50 cotton and polyester, so don't criticize me too much. But just like little changes that kind of help move the needle. But I love how this talk that you have throughout about how natural fibers also kind of tie us in this really beautiful way to the world. Like it ties us to industry. It ties us out of fast fashion, out of a world of cheap polyester and harmful chemicals and these sorts of things. And coming from a world where I have sheared some sheep in my life and done other country boy stuff.
Wow.
I thought that was very beautiful. So I think you articulated it very well.
Thank you.
So get her book, because it's great. If you live in the St. Louis area, you can borrow mine. I'm so happy that, thank you again for inviting me over, Anna. And this has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much, Jordan.
This has been great. Friends, if you like this conversation, we want to hear from you. I know that there are a lot of you who have dipped your toes into adjusting how you dress, this beauty and this art of dress. And so regardless of where you're at in your journey, definitely would love to hear from you. Please don't forget, of course, to like this video, to comment, and to share it far and wide with family and friends. If you'd like to support the Glad Trad podcast, the first thing you can do is keep us in your prayers. But also, please consider going over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/GladTrad podcast, as well as down below there on YouTube if you would like to become a channel member. All that is so helpful, people. So thank you all so much for watching. God bless you and Mary keep you. Adios.